There are moments in life when you feel like something inside you is collapsing, when the structure you thought was holding you together begins to crumble piece by piece, and you wake up each morning with this overwhelming sense that your discipline has disappeared into thin air, your motivation has evaporated like water under an unforgiving sun, and you find yourself exhausted before the day even begins. Distracted by 1,000 thoughts that pull you in every direction, overwhelmed by responsibilities and expectations and the constant noise of a world that never stops demanding more from you, and yet despite all of this chaos, despite all of this internal suffering, you cannot put your finger on exactly why you feel this way or what it is that has broken inside of you. But here is the truth that nobody has ever told you, the truth that will change everything once you truly understand it. Your suffering does not come from the world around you, it does not come from your circumstances or your failures or the people who have disappointed you, it comes from the way you think about the world, from the stories you tell yourself, from the meaning you attach to events that are, in themselves, completely neutral. For thousands of years, long before our age of anxiety and distraction, Stoic philosophers discovered and mastered a way of living that transformed soldiers into warriors of the mind, emperors into servants of virtue, slaves into free men of unshakable spirit, and ordinary men and women into unbreakable human beings who could face any storm without losing their center, any loss without losing their dignity, any challenge without losing their purpose. And today, right here in this moment, you are about to learn the 12 principles that can reset your mind from its factory settings of chaos and reactivity, rebuild your discipline from the ground up with a foundation that cannot be shaken, and transform your life not in some distant future when conditions are perfect, not tomorrow when you feel more ready, not in a month after you have prepared yourself, but immediately, right now, in this very instant. If you apply these principles with sincerity and commitment, your entire perception of reality will change, and once that fundamental shift in perception happens, once you see the world through the eyes of a Stoic, everything else in your life will follow, everything will reorganize itself around this new center of gravity, this new way of being. Let's begin. Act 1, the problem. We live in an age that our ancestors could never have imagined, an age where information moves at the speed of light, where we are bombarded every single day with thousands of images and messages and notifications that demand our attention, where we are expected to be always available, always productive, always optimized, always performing at our peak. And this relentless pace has created a kind of mental chaos that most of us have learned to accept as normal, as simply the way life is supposed to be in the 21st century. But this chaos is not normal, and deep down, you know this, you feel it in the exhaustion that no amount of sleep can cure, in the anxiety that creeps into your chest when you think about all the things you need to do, in the fragility of an ego that has been conditioned to seek validation from likes and comments and the approval of strangers, in the constant comparison with others who seem to have it all figured out while you are still struggling to get through the day. The modern world has trained you to be reactive rather than responsive, to live on the surface of life rather than in its depths, to chase after pleasures that fade almost as soon as you grasp them and to run away from discomforts that would actually make you stronger if you learned to face them with courage and clarity. And the result of all of this is a generation of people who are more connected than ever before yet feel profoundly alone, who have more opportunities than any generation in history yet feel paralyzed by choice, who have access to infinite information yet lack the wisdom to know what truly matters. You have been told that what you need is more motivation, that if you could just find the right video or the right quote or the right burst of inspiration, then you would finally be able to change your life, finally be able to stick to your goals, finally be able to become the person you know you are capable of being. But motivation is a lie, or at least it is a lie in the way most people understand it, because motivation is an emotion, and like all emotions it comes and goes like waves on a shore, sometimes strong and powerful, sometimes barely there at all. And if you build your life on motivation, then you are building your life on sand, on something that will inevitably disappear the moment things get difficult or boring or painful. What you actually need is not motivation but structure, not inspiration but discipline, not a temporary feeling but a permanent way of thinking and being that remains solid regardless of how you feel on any given day, regardless of whether you are excited or tired or scared or uncertain. The Stoics understood this thousands of years ago. They understood that the only thing you can truly rely on is not your emotions but your principles, not your feelings but your character, not your circumstances but your response to your circumstances, and this is why their philosophy has survived for 2 millennia while countless other systems of thought have been forgotten. The pressures of modern life, the speed at which everything moves, the complexity of the choices we face, the uncertainty of the future, the fragility of the systems we depend on, all of these things make ancient Stoic wisdom not less relevant but infinitely more relevant than it was even in the time of Marcus Aurelius or Epictetus or Seneca. When the external world is chaos, when you cannot control the economy or the politics or the opinions of others or the sudden disasters that can upend your life in an instant, the only refuge you have is your internal world, the fortress of your mind, the unshakable principles that guide your actions and give meaning to your existence. This is why these 12 principles matter today more than ever, because they offer you a way to find stability in instability, peace in chaos, strength in vulnerability, and purpose in a world that often seems meaningless. Act 2. The 12 Stoic Principles. Principle 1. Control what you can. This is the most fundamental principle of Stoic philosophy, the foundation upon which everything else is built, and it is deceptively simple. There are things in life that are within your control and things that are not, and wisdom consists in knowing the difference between the two and investing your energy only in what you can actually control. Most of your suffering comes from trying to control things that are fundamentally outside your sphere of influence, trying to control what other people think of you, what they say about you, whether they love you or respect you or appreciate you, trying to control the weather or the traffic or the economy or whether you get the job or the promotion or the recognition you believe you deserve. Imagine a man who has just lost his job, who spends his days consumed with bitterness and resentment, replaying the moment he was fired over and over in his mind, cursing his boss and the company and the unfairness of the world. But then one day he encounters this Stoic principle and everything changes, because he realizes that he cannot control the fact that he was fired, he cannot go back in time and change what happened. But he can control how he responds to this moment, he can control whether he uses this setback as an excuse to give up or as an opportunity to rebuild himself into something stronger. And once he makes this mental shift, once he stops wasting energy on what he cannot control and focuses entirely on what he can, his entire direction changes and he finds a new job that is actually better than the one he lost. The application of this principle is simple and immediate. Right now, in this moment, draw 3 circles in your mind. The first circle contains everything you have complete control over, which is essentially your thoughts, your judgments, your actions, and your responses. The second circle contains things you have partial influence over but cannot fully control, like your health or your relationships or your career success. And the third circle contains everything else, all the external events and other people's choices and the movements of the universe that are completely beyond your power. And from this moment forward, invest 100% of your energy in the first circle, do what you can in the second circle without attachment to outcomes, and let go completely of the third circle. Principle 2. You suffer more in imagination than in reality. Seneca wrote that we suffer more often in imagination than in reality, and this is one of the most profound psychological insights ever articulated, because if you examine your life with honesty you will discover that 90% of the things you worry about never actually happen, and the 10% that do happen are almost never as bad as you imagined they would be. Picture a young student who is terrified about an upcoming exam, so terrified that he cannot sleep the night before, so terrified that his stomach is in knots and his hands are shaking, and in his mind he has already failed the exam and disappointed his parents and ruined his future and destroyed any chance of the life he wanted. But then the day comes and he sits down to take the exam and realizes that it is actually manageable, that he knows more than he thought he did, that his preparation was sufficient, and he ends up passing with a good grade. And afterward he realizes that all of that suffering, all of those sleepless nights and anxious hours, were completely unnecessary because he was not suffering from the reality of the exam but from his imagination of what might happen. This is the trap that most people live in their entire lives, spending their precious mental energy not on the present moment but on terrible futures that exist only in their minds, catastrophizing every small problem into a life-ending disaster, creating elaborate stories about how things will go wrong, and then being shocked when reality turns out to be far less dramatic and far more manageable than they feared. The immediate application of this principle is to develop what the Stoics call the discipline of assent, which means that whenever you feel anxiety or fear rising in you, you pause and ask yourself a simple question: is this real, or is this just in my imagination? And in that moment of questioning you create space between the fearful thought and your reaction to it. And most of the time you will realize that what you are afraid of is not actually happening right now, it is just a story you are telling yourself. And once you see this clearly, the power of that fear dissolves like smoke in the wind. Principle 3. Silence is a superpower. In a world that rewards loud voices and constant self-expression, that encourages you to share every thought and feeling and opinion, that measures your worth by your ability to perform and impress and persuade, the Stoics understood that silence is not weakness but power, that the ability to remain quiet when others are losing their composure is a sign of tremendous inner strength. Imagine a situation where someone insults you in front of others, where your ego screams at you to defend yourself, to strike back, to prove that you are not weak, to show them that they cannot treat you this way. But instead of reacting immediately, you choose silence, you breathe, you observe the emotion rising in you without being controlled by it, and in that silence you maintain your dignity while the other person reveals their lack of control. And later people remember not the insult but your composed response, your refusal to descend to the level of petty conflict. Most of the problems in your life, most of the conflicts and regrets and damaged relationships, come from speaking when you should have remained silent, from reacting when you should have observed, from letting your emotions hijack your words before your wisdom could intervene. The application is what the Stoics might call the 10-second rule of silence, which means that before you respond to anything that triggers an emotional reaction in you, before you send that angry text message or make that cutting remark or defend yourself against a perceived slight, you practice 10 seconds of complete silence, you breathe, you create space, and in that space you give your rational mind the chance to catch up with your emotional mind. And 9 times out of 10 you will realize that the response you were about to give would have made things worse rather than better, and you will choose a different path, a wiser path, a more stoic path. Principle 4. The discomfort is training. The modern world is built around the pursuit of comfort, around the idea that the goal of life is to eliminate all sources of difficulty and pain and struggle, to surround yourself with softness and ease and pleasure. But the Stoics knew that this path leads not to happiness but to weakness, not to fulfillment but to fragility, because it is only through voluntary exposure to discomfort that you develop the strength to handle the inevitable hardships that life will throw at you. Picture someone who practices this principle every single day, who wakes up early even when their bed is warm and comfortable, who takes a cold shower even when their body protests, who exercises even when they are tired, who chooses the difficult conversation over the easy avoidance, not because they enjoy suffering but because they understand that each small discomfort they voluntarily embrace is training for the larger discomforts they cannot avoid. Each moment of discipline is a deposit in the bank account of their character. When you have trained yourself to be comfortable with discomfort, when you have practiced doing hard things on purpose, then when life inevitably brings you real suffering, real challenge, real hardship, you will not fall apart the way most people do. You will not be shocked or overwhelmed or paralyzed, because you have already proven to yourself that you can handle difficulty, that you are not as fragile as your comfortable life had led you to believe. The immediate application is simple and powerful. Choose one painful thing to do every single day, something that takes you out of your comfort zone, something that requires discipline rather than motivation, whether it is waking up early or exercising or fasting or having a difficult conversation or working on a project that scares you, and do this not as punishment but as training, as a way of building the mental muscle that will serve you for the rest of your life. Principle 5. Embrace voluntary suffering. This principle goes deeper than the previous one, because it is not just about tolerating discomfort but about actively seeking out forms of voluntary suffering as a spiritual practice, as a way of preparing yourself for loss and hardship, as a reminder that you can survive and even thrive with far less than you currently have. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor of Rome who had access to every luxury and comfort imaginable, chose to spend years on military campaigns in harsh conditions, sleeping in tents, eating simple food, enduring cold and danger, not because he had to but because he understood that his character needed to be forged in the fire of difficulty, that if he only ever lived in comfort he would become soft and unable to handle the inevitable reversals of fortune that come to every human being. The Stoics practiced exercises like sleeping on the floor, eating plain food, wearing simple clothes, imagining that they had lost everything they valued, not because they were masochists but because they wanted to prove to themselves that their happiness was not dependent on external things, that they could be content with very little, that poverty or loss or hardship would not destroy them because they had already voluntarily tasted these things and found that they could endure. The application is to choose one form of voluntary deprivation every day or every week, whether it is fasting from food or entertainment or comfort, whether it is giving up something you enjoy or doing something you find unpleasant, and during this practice you remind yourself that this is not real suffering but training, that you are building the resilience you will need when life takes things from you without asking permission. When you lose what you love, when you face circumstances you cannot control. Principle 6. Focus on your response, not the event. Between every external event and your experience of that event there is a gap, and in that gap lies your freedom, your power, your ability to choose how you will respond rather than simply reacting according to your conditioning and your habits and your fears. The Stoics understood that the event itself is neutral, it is not good or bad, it is simply what is, and what makes it seem good or bad is not the event but your judgment about the event, your interpretation, the story you tell yourself about what it means and what it says about you and what it will lead to in the future. Imagine someone whose flight is cancelled, whose carefully planned trip is disrupted, whose schedule is thrown into chaos, and they have two choices. They can rage against the airline and the injustice of it all, they can let this event ruin their entire day or week, they can tell themselves that this is a disaster and that everything is falling apart, or they can pause and ask themselves the essential Stoic question: what is my best response to this situation? And in asking this question they take back their power. They recognize that while they cannot control the cancelled flight, they can absolutely control whether they spend this unexpected free time productively or destructively, whether they treat the airline staff with kindness or cruelty, whether they see this as an obstacle or an opportunity. This principle applies to every single thing that happens to you, from minor annoyances to major tragedies, from someone cutting you off in traffic to losing someone you love, and the application is to develop the habit of immediately asking yourself whenever something unwanted happens, what is my best response? Not why did this happen, not who is to blame, not why me, but simply what is my best response? And that question alone will transform your relationship with reality. Principle 7. Let go of what you can't keep. Everything in this world is temporary, every possession will be lost or broken, every person you love will eventually die or leave, every role you play will one day end, every achievement will fade into memory, and the only question is whether you will spend your life clinging desperately to things you cannot keep or whether you will learn to hold them lightly, to appreciate them fully while they are here and to release them gracefully when they are gone. The Stoics were not pessimists. They did not say these things to make you sad or to discourage you from loving or striving or caring. They said these things to free you from the suffering that comes from attachment, from the illusion that you can possess anything permanently, from the false belief that your happiness depends on keeping everything exactly as it is right now. Picture someone who has just gone through a painful breakup, who is consumed with the desire to get their ex back, who cannot accept that the relationship is over, who spends months or even years clinging to something that no longer exists, replaying memories, checking social media, hoping for a reconciliation. And all of this clinging creates immense suffering, but then one day they truly internalize this Stoic principle. They realize that they never actually owned this person, that all. Relationships are temporary agreements that either person can end at any time, that trying to hold on to what is already gone is like trying to hold water in your hands, and in that moment of realization they finally let go, and with that letting go comes not more sadness but relief, not emptiness but freedom, because they are no longer carrying the weight of an impossible attachment. The application is to practice what the Stoics call the premeditation of loss, which means regularly reminding yourself that everything you have is borrowed, that the people you love are mortal, that your possessions are fragile, that your status and achievements are temporary, and this practice does not make you love them less but helps you appreciate them more fully in the present moment while preparing you to face their loss with grace and acceptance rather than denial and despair. Principle 8. A memento mori. Remember that you will die. This is not meant to be morbid or depressing. It is meant to wake you up, to remind you that your time is finite, that you do not have forever to become the person you want to be or to do the things that truly matter or to repair the relationships you have damaged or to pursue the meaning you claim to care about. The Stoics kept symbols of death around them, skulls on their desks, phrases like memento mori written where they would see them every day, not because they were obsessed with death but because they understood that awareness of mortality is the most powerful motivator for living with intention and urgency and authenticity. Imagine someone who lives as if they have infinite time, who puts off important conversations until tomorrow, who delays pursuing their dreams until the conditions are perfect, who wastes years in jobs they hate or relationships that drain them or habits that slowly destroy them, all because they believe on some unconscious level that there will always be more time, that they can start living their real life next year or after this project or when they retire. But then one day they receive news that shatters this illusion, a diagnosis or an accident or the sudden death of someone their age, and suddenly they realize with terrible clarity that time is running out, that they have been sleepwalking through the only life they will ever have, and this realization, as painful as it is, becomes the catalyst for them to finally start living with the urgency and authenticity and courage they should have had all along. The application is to spend 10 seconds every single day contemplating your mortality, not in a depressing way but in a clarifying way, asking yourself questions like, if this were my last year alive, how would I spend it? Or if I died tomorrow, what would I regret not having done or said? And letting these questions guide your choices and priorities, because when you truly internalize that your time is limited, you stop wasting it on things that do not matter and you start investing it in the things that do. Principle 9. The obstacle is the way. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the impediment to action advances action, that what stands in the way becomes the way, and this is one of the most revolutionary ideas in all of philosophy because it completely reverses the normal way of thinking about obstacles and challenges and setbacks. Most people see an obstacle as something negative, something that prevents them from getting what they want, something to be avoided or overcome or eliminated, but the Stoics saw obstacles as opportunities, as the raw material for growth and learning and transformation, as the very thing that makes achievement meaningful and character possible. Picture an entrepreneur who launches a business with great enthusiasm and after a few months that business fails completely, loses all the money invested, leaves him embarrassed and uncertain and tempted to give up. But instead of seeing this failure as the end of his dreams, he applies this Stoic principle and asks himself what this obstacle is teaching him, what skills he learned, what mistakes he will not repeat, what relationships he built, what resilience he developed, and he realizes that this apparent failure was actually preparation, that it was stripping away his naivety and his arrogance and his unrealistic expectations and replacing them with wisdom and humility and practical knowledge, and so he uses this obstacle as the foundation for his next attempt. And this time he succeeds not despite the failure but because of it. The application is to develop the habit of asking yourself whenever you encounter any obstacle, any setback, any challenge, what is this teaching me? And how can I use this, rather than why is this happening to me? Because the first set of questions empowers you while the second set disempowers you. The first set turns you into an active agent who uses reality as fuel while the second set turns you into a passive victim who is at the mercy of circumstances. Principle 10. Value discipline over motivation. Motivation is the spark that starts the fire, but discipline is the wood that keeps it burning. Motivation gets you to the gym once, but discipline gets you there 1,000 times. Motivation writes the first page, but discipline writes the book. And if you want to transform your life, you must stop relying on the temporary high of inspiration and start building the permanent structure of disciplined action. The gladiators in ancient Rome did not train because they felt motivated. They trained because they were disciplined, because their lives depended on their preparation, because they understood that in the arena their feelings would be irrelevant and only their training would matter. And the same is true for you in the arena of your own life. When the moment of challenge comes, when you are tired or scared or discouraged, your motivation will have abandoned you, but your discipline will still be there if you have built it strong enough. Picture someone who has decided to wake up at 5 in the morning every day to work on their most important project, and the first few days they do it and they feel great about themselves. They feel like they are finally becoming the person they want to be. But then a week goes by and the motivation fades and the alarm goes off and it is dark and cold and their bed is so comfortable. And in that moment they have a choice, to rely on motivation which has already disappeared or to rely on discipline which they have been building through repeated action. And if they choose discipline, if they get up despite not wanting to, they have just added another layer to the foundation of their character. They have proven to themselves that they can do hard things even when they do not feel like it. And this proof compounds over time until discipline becomes their default mode of operation. The application is to create a 3-minute ritual of discipline that you perform every single day without exception, whether it is meditation or journaling or exercise or reading, something simple enough that you can always do it but meaningful enough that doing it reinforces your identity as a disciplined person, and you commit to this ritual not for a week or a month but for the rest of your life. Because discipline is not a temporary strategy but a permanent way of being. Principle 11. Speak less, do more. There is a certain type of person who is always talking about what they are going to do, always sharing their plans and their goals and their grand visions, always seeking validation and encouragement and praise for intentions rather than actions. And then there is another type of person who speaks very little about what they are working on but whose results speak for themselves, whose actions accumulate quietly and consistently until one day everyone realizes that this person has actually done what others only talked about. The Stoics understood that speaking about your goals dissipates the energy you need to achieve them, that seeking approval for your plans gives you a false sense of accomplishment before you have actually accomplished anything, that public declarations often serve your ego more than your progress. Imagine two people who both decide they want to transform their health. The first person tells everyone they know about their new diet and exercise plan, posts about it on social media, buys expensive equipment, talks endlessly about their commitment to change, and within a few weeks they have quietly quit and moved on to the next thing they will talk about but not do, while the second person tells no one, simply starts making different choices, eating differently, moving their body, being consistent, and months later people notice that something has changed about them. They ask what happened, and this person simply says, "I just started doing it," because for them the doing was more important than the talking. The application is to practice one silent action every day, which means choosing one thing that will move you toward your goals and doing it without telling anyone, without posting about it, without seeking validation or approval, just doing it quietly and consistently and letting the results speak for themselves, because in this age of constant performance and self-promotion, there is tremendous power in being someone whose actions are louder than their words. Principle 12. Alive as if you were already the person you want to be. This is perhaps the most transformational principle of all, because it collapses the gap between who you are and who you want to become. It eliminates the waiting period during which you tell yourself that you will start living differently once you have achieved certain things or once conditions are right, and it demands that you start being that person right now, in this moment, with the circumstances you currently have. The Stoics understood that you do not become virtuous by waiting to feel virtuous, you become virtuous by acting virtuously right now. You do not become disciplined by waiting until you feel motivated, you become disciplined by doing the disciplined thing even when you do not feel like it. You do not become courageous by waiting until you are not afraid, you become courageous by acting with courage despite your fear. Picture someone who wants to become a writer but who keeps putting off writing because they tell themselves they are not really a writer yet. They do not have the credentials or the experience or the talent, and this belief becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because as long as they do not write they will never become a writer. But then one day they encounter this Stoic principle and everything changes. They realize that a writer is simply someone who writes, that they can become a writer today. By sitting down and writing, that the identity they seek is not something they need to earn or achieve but something they can simply step into through action, and so they start writing, not perfectly, not with the skill they will have later, but they start, and with each word they write they become more and more the writer they always wanted to be. The application is immediate and powerful. Right now, in this moment, choose one identity or characteristic that you want to embody, whether it is being disciplined or healthy or creative or generous or courageous, and then take one micro-action that someone with that identity would take. If you want to be a healthy person, do one healthy thing right now. If you want to be a disciplined person, do one disciplined thing right now. If you want to be a courageous person, do one courageous thing right now. And in doing this you are not pretending or lying to yourself, you are literally becoming that person through the alchemy of action, because you are what you repeatedly do, and if you repeatedly do what a disciplined, healthy, courageous person does, then you are that person, regardless of your past, regardless of your feelings, regardless of what anyone else thinks. Act 3. The transformation. These 12 principles are not just ideas to understand intellectually, they are tools to transform your entire way of being in the world, to reshape your mind from its default patterns of reactivity and fear and attachment into something stronger, something more resilient, something more aligned with the deepest truths of human existence. Control what you can and let go of what you cannot. This alone will eliminate 90% of your suffering, because you will no longer waste your precious energy fighting against reality but will instead channel all of that energy into shaping the one thing you actually have power over, which is yourself. Recognize that you suffer more in imagination than in reality, and you will free yourself from the prison of anxiety, from the terrible futures that exist only in your mind, and you will start living in the present moment where life actually happens. Embrace silence as a superpower, and you will avoid countless conflicts and regrets. You will maintain your dignity and your composure even when those around you are losing theirs. Train yourself through voluntary discomfort and suffering, and you will develop a resilience that makes you virtually unbreakable, because you will have proven to yourself that you can handle far more than your comfortable life has led you to believe. Focus on your response rather than the event, and you will reclaim your power from external circumstances. You will become the author of your own experience rather than a passive victim of what happens to you. Let go of what you cannot keep, and you will find the freedom that comes from non-attachment, the ability to love deeply without clinging desperately, to appreciate fully without needing to possess permanently. Remember that you will die, and you will finally start living with the urgency and authenticity and courage that this one precious life deserves. See the obstacle as the way, and every challenge becomes an opportunity, every setback becomes a setup for something greater, every difficulty becomes the raw material for your growth. Value discipline over motivation, and you will build a foundation that holds strong regardless of how you feel on any given day. Speak less and do more, and you will become someone whose actions inspire rather than whose words impress. Live as if you were already the person you want to be, and you will collapse the distance between your current self and your ideal self. You will step into your potential right now rather than waiting for permission or perfect conditions. Imagine a man standing in the ruins of his former life, surrounded by the debris of broken dreams and failed plans and shattered expectations, and for a moment he is overwhelmed by the destruction, by the magnitude of what needs to be rebuilt. But then something shifts inside him, a clarity emerges from the chaos like light breaking through storm clouds, and he understands that this destruction was necessary, that the old structure needed to fall before a new one could be built on stronger foundations. He begins the work of reconstruction not with grand gestures but with small disciplined actions, one stone placed deliberately upon another, one decision made in alignment with his principles, one moment of choosing discipline over comfort, response over reaction, courage over fear, and these small actions accumulate like drops of water filling a vessel, imperceptible at first but undeniable over time. The chaos of his mind begins to settle into order, the scattered fragments of his attention gather into focused purpose, the reactive patterns that once controlled him gradually lose their power as new patterns of intentional action take their place, and slowly, steadily, methodically, he transforms himself from someone who is at the mercy of circumstances into someone who shapes his circumstances through the unshakable foundation of Stoic principles. He becomes like marble being carved by a master sculptor, and the sculptor is not some external force but his own disciplined will, his own commitment to these ancient truths, his own daily choice to live according to principles rather than impulses, to build his character rather than merely manage his image, to pursue virtue rather than merely avoid pain. The transformation you want, the life you dream about, the person you know you are capable of becoming, none of this will wait for you, none of this will come to you while you sit passively hoping for the right moment or the perfect circumstances or the burst of motivation that will finally get you moving. It begins now, in this moment, not with some massive overhaul of your entire life but with one small decision aligned with these Stoic principles, one moment of choosing control over chaos, response over reaction, discipline over motivation, action over talk, reality over imagination, the obstacle as the way rather than the obstacle as an excuse. You do not need to feel ready, you do not need to have it all figured out, you do not need perfect conditions or unlimited resources or the approval of others, you simply need to begin, to take one step and then another, trusting that the path reveals itself to those who walk it rather than to those who stand at the beginning trying to see the end. The old version of yourself, the one who waits and hesitates and makes excuses and talks instead of doing, that version is not serving you, it has never served you, and every day that you remain that person is a day stolen from the life you could be living, and at some point you have to decide that you have had enough of being less than you are capable of being, that you are ready to stop letting fear and comfort and conditioning run your life, that you are willing to do the difficult work of transformation not because it is easy but because it is necessary, not because you feel like it but because you have decided that this is who you are now. The Stoics would tell you that this decision, this moment of choosing to live differently, is not something that happens to you but something you do. It is an act of will, an assertion of your agency, a declaration that you will no longer be a passive recipient of whatever life brings but an active shaper of your own character and destiny within the bounds of what you can control. Stop waiting, stop preparing, stop looking for the perfect moment, because the perfect moment is now, it has always been now, it will always be now. And every second you spend delaying is a second you will never get back, a second stolen from the finite time you have been given to become who you were meant to be. There is something profound that happens when you truly internalize these principles, when they move from intellectual understanding into lived experience, when they become not just ideas you know but truths you embody in every action and every choice and every response to what life brings you. You begin to move through the world differently, with a kind of quiet confidence that comes not from arrogance or from having all the answers but from knowing that whatever happens, you have the tools to handle it, that no external circumstance can break you because your foundation is built on something internal and unshakable. People will notice this change in you even if they cannot articulate what is different. They will sense that you are no longer reactive, no longer desperate for approval, no longer thrown off balance by every unexpected event, no longer living at the mercy of your emotions or your circumstances or the opinions of others. They will see someone who seems at peace even in chaos, someone who remains steady even when the ground is shaking, someone who faces difficulty not with complaint or avoidance but with a kind of warrior acceptance, someone who has mastered the art that the Stoics spent lifetimes perfecting, which is the art of living well regardless of external conditions. And this transformation will not happen because you are special or gifted or lucky. It will happen because you committed to these principles, because you practiced them daily, because you chose again and again to live according to your values rather than your impulses, to build your character rather than merely manage your circumstances, to focus on what you can control and release what you cannot. The ancient Stoics, Marcus Aurelius writing in his tent during brutal military campaigns, Epictetus teaching from his experience as a former slave, Seneca navigating the treacherous politics of imperial Rome. They did not have easier lives than you do. They faced wars and tyranny and disease and uncertainty. They knew suffering and loss and death just as intimately as anyone who has ever lived. But they also knew something that most people never learn, which is that external circumstances do not determine the quality of your inner life, that you can be free even in chains, peaceful even in war, strong even in the face of loss, content even with very little, because true power comes not from controlling the world but from controlling yourself. Not from having everything you want but from wanting only what you can have with virtue and dignity intact. These 12 principles are their gift to you across the millennia, tested and refined and proven by thousands of years of human experience, and they are offering you the same transformation they found, the same liberation from unnecessary suffering, the same path to a life of meaning and purpose and unshakable inner strength. But knowledge without application is meaningless. Understanding without practice is just another form of entertainment, and if you close this video and go back to living exactly as you were living before, then none of this matters. These words will fade from your memory like every other piece of content you have consumed and forgotten. The only thing that matters now is what you do next, the choice you make in this moment. Whether you will apply even one of these principles today, right now, in the next 10 minutes, whether you will take one small action that proves to yourself that something has shifted, that you are ready to step into a different way of being. The Stoics did not try to change the world. They understood that the world is vast and complex and largely beyond any individual's control. They did not waste their energy trying to make everything perfect or trying to eliminate all suffering or trying to force reality to conform to their wishes. Instead, they changed themselves. They mastered their own minds. They built their character like master craftsmen building a temple. With patience and precision and unwavering commitment to excellence, they transformed their inner world from chaos into order, from reactivity into intentionality, from weakness into strength. And because they changed themselves so completely, because they became living embodiments of their principles, because they radiated the kind of wisdom and calm and courage that can only come from years of disciplined practice, the world around them changed as well, not because they tried to change it but because transformation is contagious, because people are drawn to those who have found what most are still seeking, because a life lived with virtue and purpose and inner freedom is magnetic in its authenticity. This is your invitation, not to become a perfect human being overnight, not to never make mistakes or feel emotions or face difficulties, but to begin the journey of transformation that the Stoics began over 2,000 years ago and that is still available to you today, right now, in this moment. You have the principles, you have the path, you have everything you need to begin, and the only question that remains is whether you have the courage to take the first step, whether you are willing to let go of the comfortable familiar patterns that have been holding you back, whether you are ready to become someone who lives by design rather than by default, by principles rather than by impulses, by choice rather than by conditioning. The transformation you seek is not somewhere in the distant future. It is not dependent on circumstances aligning perfectly or on you finally feeling ready or on some external validation or permission. It is here, accessible, immediate, waiting only for your decision to claim it. So decide now, in this sacred moment where awareness meets possibility, where understanding meets action, where the person you have been meets the person you are becoming, decide that you will not waste another day living beneath your potential, that you will not spend another year making excuses, that you will not arrive at the end of your life wondering what might have been if you had only had the courage to begin. the Stoics would remind you one final time that you do not have infinite chances, that your time is running out with every passing second, that death is not some distant abstract concept but a reality that could arrive at any moment, and this is not meant to frighten you but to wake you up, to strip away all the illusions and excuses and rationalizations, to confront you with the raw truth that this life, your one precious miraculous fleeting life, is happening right now and it demands from you a response worthy of the gift you have been given. They did not try to change the world, they changed themselves, and the world followed.